The dusty road stretched endless before her, and Mariah Foster gripped the reins tighter as her wagon jolted over another rut, wondering if hiring on as a garden keeper for a ranch outside Verde, Nevada was the worst decision she had ever made or the only one left to her. The year was 1882, and the Nevada Territory had only been a state for 18 years. Mariah had traveled from Carson City, where she had worked in a boarding house kitchen, until the establishment burned down 3 weeks prior. At 22 years old, she found herself with few prospects and even fewer coins in her pocket. When she saw the advertisement at the general store seeking someone with knowledge of vegetable cultivation, she had responded immediately. The reply came swiftly. A rancher named Fletcher Caine needed help establishing a proper garden on his property. He offered fair wages, a small cabin on the land, and respect for her work. She had written back accepting before she could second-guess herself. Now, as the wagon rattled closer to what she hoped was the right property, Mariah felt her stomach clench with nervousness. The landscape around her was harsh and unforgiving, dotted with sagebrush and the occasional juniper tree. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the warming spring weather. She passed the small settlement of Verde, barely more than a few buildings clustered near the railroad tracks, and continued westward as her directions indicated. The ranch appeared suddenly around a bend. A weathered wooden fence marked the property line, and beyond it stretched acres of brown grass punctuated by scattered cattle. The house itself was modest, a single-story structure built of logs and rough-hewn planks. A barn stood behind it, and several smaller outbuildings dotted the property. What caught Mariah's attention immediately was the plot of land near the house, clearly fenced off from the grazing animals. It was perhaps half an acre, the soil turned but nothing growing in it. This, she realized, would be her responsibility. As she pulled the wagon to a stop near the house, a man emerged from the barn. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His dark hair fell past his collar and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore work-worn denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and dusty boots. As he approached, Mariah noticed his eyes were a striking shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering over the mountains. "Miss Foster." His voice was deep and rough, as if he did not use it often. "Yes, Mr. Caine," he nodded once, reaching up to help her down from the wagon. His hands were large and calloused, but his grip was gentle. "Fletcher Caine, welcome to the ranch." Mariah stepped down, brushing dust from her traveling dress. She was of average height, with dark blonde hair pinned up beneath her bonnet and blue eyes that assessed everything around her with practical intelligence. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Caine. I am eager to see what I will be working with." Fletcher gestured toward the empty plot. "Not much to see yet. Soil's decent, but nothing's been planted in years. My father tried to keep a garden before he passed, but that was more than 5 years back. Since then, it has been just me and the cattle." They walked together toward the fenced area. Mariah could see that someone had recently turned the soil, likely Fletcher himself. The earth was rocky in places, but she had worked with worse. "Do you have any tools, seeds?" "Barnes got shovels, hose, a plow. Ordered seeds from Carson City when you wrote back accepting. They arrived last week." Fletcher kept his hands in his pockets as he talked, his gaze distant. "Should have everything you need. And the cabin you mentioned." He pointed to a small structure she had not noticed initially, set back near a grove of cottonwood trees. It was tiny, maybe 10 feet by 12, but it had a door, windows, and a chimney. "Fixed it up best I could. Roof does not leak. Got a stove inside, bed, table. Basic." Mariah nodded. It was more than she had hoped for, honestly. "May I see the seeds?" Fletcher led her to the barn, which smelled of hay and horses. 3 horses occupied stalls along one wall and farming equipment hung neatly on the other. He pulled down a wooden crate from a shelf and set it on a workbench. Inside were packets of seeds, more than Mariah had expected. Beans, peas, carrots, turnips, beets, onions, lettuce, cabbage, squash, and tomatoes. Someone had been thorough in their ordering. "This is excellent," she said, examining each packet. "With the growing season just starting, we can get most of these in the ground within the week. The soil will need some preparation, though. Do you have any manure from the cattle?" "Plenty," Fletcher said. "I can bring a wagon load over tomorrow." "Perfect." Mariah looked up at him, noticing for the first time how he seemed uncomfortable maintaining eye contact. He would glance at her, then away, then back again. "Mr. Caine, I want to make sure we have an understanding. I am here to work, and I will work hard. I know my way around a garden. My mother taught me everything she knew before she died, and I spent 3 years helping maintain the vegetable garden for the boarding house. I will not disappoint you." "Did not think you would," Fletcher said quietly. "Would not have hired you otherwise." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Fletcher cleared his throat. "Should probably get you settled in the cabin. I will bring your things over." The cabin was indeed basic, but it was clean. Someone, Fletcher she assumed, had scrubbed the floors and walls. The bed had a simple quilt, faded but well made. The stove was small but functional. A rough-hewn table with one chair sat beneath the window. Mariah felt a surge of gratitude that surprised her with its intensity. "It is perfect," she said. "Thank you." Fletcher set down her trunk and the bag of supplies she had brought. "I eat breakfast just after dawn, supper before dark. You are welcome to join me at the main house for meals, or you can cook here. Your choice." Mariah considered. She wanted to establish a professional relationship, but eating alone every day seemed unnecessarily isolating. "Perhaps I could join you for supper. I usually eat a light breakfast and midday meal while I work. Suits me." Fletcher moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Foster, I am grateful you are here. Been meaning to get that garden going again for years now. Just never seemed to find the time or energy to do it myself." After he left, Mariah sat on the bed and let out a long breath. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of wind rustling through the cottonwood trees outside. Through the window, she could see the empty garden plot waiting for her. It felt like a fresh start, something she desperately needed after the chaos and uncertainty of recent weeks. She spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking her few belongings and exploring the immediate area around the cabin. A small creek ran through the cottonwood grove, the water clear and cold. She could hear birds singing and saw evidence of deer tracks in the soft earth near the water. Despite the harsh landscape, there was a certain beauty here, a wildness that spoke to something in her soul. That evening, she walked to the main house as the sun began to set behind the mountains. Fletcher answered her knock immediately, as if he had been waiting nearby. The interior of his house was as sparse as her cabin but larger. A fireplace dominated one wall, with a simple kitchen area opposite. A table with 2 chairs sat in the middle. Through an open door, she could see into a bedroom, the bed neatly made. "Hope stew is all right," Fletcher said, ladling food into 2 bowls. "It is what I make most often. Stew is fine." Mariah sat at the table, accepting the bowl he offered. The stew was simple but well seasoned, with chunks of beef, potatoes, and onions. They ate in silence for several minutes before Mariah decided to break it. "How long have you been ranching here alone?" "5 years, since my father died. He started this place back in '68, right after the war. He was a Union soldier, came west looking for a fresh start. Fletcher kept his eyes on his bowl as he talked. I was born back in Missouri in '57. We moved out here when I was 11, been here ever since. Mariah did the mathematics quickly. Fletcher was 25, only 3 years older than herself. What about your mother? She died when I was young. Fever. It was just me and my father for most of my life. He finally looked up at her. What about you? You mentioned your mother taught you gardening. My parents had a small farm in California. We grew vegetables and sold them in town. My mother was the one who really understood plants, how to make things grow even in difficult conditions. She died 4 years ago. My father followed a year later. I think he just could not stand to be without her. Mariah found herself speaking more openly than she had intended. Something about Fletcher's quiet presence made it easy to talk. I went to Carson City, found work in a boarding house. It was not much, but it was steady. Then the fire happened, and here I am. Sorry about your parents, Fletcher said softly. Thank you. I am sorry about yours as well. They finished their meal, and Mariah helped clean the dishes despite Fletcher's protests. As she walked back to her cabin under the emerging stars, she realized that she felt more at peace than she had in months. There was something about this place, about the quiet rancher who owned it, that felt right in a way she could not quite explain. The next morning, Mariah woke before dawn, eager to begin work. She dressed in her oldest work dress, tied her hair back with a scarf, and headed to the garden plot. Fletcher was already there, unloading wheelbarrows full of composted manure onto the soil. He had removed his shirt in the cool morning air, and Mariah tried not to notice the way his muscles moved as he worked. "Morning," he said, pulling his shirt back on when he saw her. "Good morning. Let me help with that." They worked together, spreading the manure across the plot, then turning it into the soil with hose and shovels. It was hard physical labor, and Mariah relished it. She had always preferred working with her hands, feeling the earth under her fingers, knowing that her efforts would result in tangible growth and life. Fletcher proved to be a steady worker, never complaining, always willing to do whatever needed doing. He took direction from her without any of the masculine pride she had expected. When she suggested they needed to remove more rocks from one section, he simply nodded and began hauling them away. When she explained how the garden should be laid out to maximize sun exposure and water distribution, he listened carefully and helped measure accordingly. By midday, they had prepared half the plot. Mariah straightened, pressing her hands against her lower back, and surveyed their progress with satisfaction. Fletcher handed her a canteen, and she drank gratefully. "You know your business," he said. "So do you. You are a good worker, Mr. Caine. Fletcher is fine. No need for formality when we are covered in manure." Mariah laughed, surprised by his small joke. "All right then, you should call me Mariah." Something shifted between them in that moment, some subtle lowering of barriers. They returned to work with an easier companionship, and Mariah found herself humming as she worked. Fletcher did not join in, but she noticed him glancing at her occasionally, something that might have been a smile hidden in his beard. Over the next week, they fell into a comfortable routine. Mariah would rise early and work in the garden through the morning. Fletcher would check on her periodically while managing his cattle and other ranch duties. Sometimes he would join her for an hour or two, helping with the heavier work. In the evenings, she would join him for supper, and their conversations gradually became longer and more comfortable. She learned that Fletcher was a man of few words but deep thoughts. He loved this land with a fierce devotion, saw beauty in the harsh Nevada landscape that many people missed. He read voraciously, his small collection of books ranging from agricultural manuals to poetry. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged unexpectedly, making her laugh when she least expected it. Fletcher, in turn, learned that Mariah was resilient and optimistic despite the hardships she had faced. She saw possibility where others saw only difficulty. She could discuss anything from crop rotation to the political situation back east. She sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her, and the sound of her voice made his lonely ranch feel less empty. The garden began to transform under Mariah's care. Neat rows of emerging seedlings created a geometric pattern against the brown earth. She installed a simple irrigation system using the creek water, digging channels that Fletcher helped her line with rocks. Stakes and string marked where climbing plants would grow. A scarecrow, assembled from old clothes and straw, stood guard in the center. One evening, about 3 weeks after Mariah's arrival, Fletcher found her sitting on the steps of her cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. He had 2 cups of coffee and he offered her one as he sat beside her. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Fletcher said, "The garden looks good, better than I imagined it could. Give it another month and we will have fresh vegetables. By summer's end, we will have enough to store for winter." "I have not had fresh vegetables in 5 years," Fletcher admitted. "I have been living on salt pork, dried beans, and whatever I can buy in town. I forgot what it is like to have good food." Mariah looked at him, noticing the way the fading light softened his features. "It must have been lonely all these years by yourself." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said, "it has been lonely. I got used to it, I suppose. Or I thought I did. Having you here, it made me realize how much I had been missing. Not just the food, though I am looking forward to that, but having someone to talk to, hearing another person's voice, having a reason to care about things beyond just surviving." Mariah felt her heart beat faster. "I have felt the same way. After my parents died, I was just going through motions. Work, sleep, work, sleep. I thought I was content, but I was just numb. Coming here, working in the garden, talking with you at supper, it has made me feel alive again." Fletcher turned to look at her directly. "I am glad you came here, Mariah. So am I." Their eyes met and held. Mariah felt something pass between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing quietly over the past weeks. Neither of them moved, but the air seemed charged with possibility. The moment was broken by the distant sound of cattle lowing. Fletcher stood, clearing his throat. "I should check on them. Sometimes wolves come down from the mountains at night. Of course." Mariah tried to keep the disappointment from her voice. After he left, she sat for a long time in the gathering darkness, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She had not come here looking for romance. She had come looking for work, for stability, for a place to belong. But somehow, without either of them intending it, something more was developing. The question was whether Fletcher felt the same way, or if she was reading too much into his words and glances. The answer came a few days later. Mariah was working in the garden, weeding around the bean plants, when she heard a horse approaching. She straightened to see a rider coming up the road, a woman in a fine riding habit. As she drew closer, Mariah could see she was perhaps 30 years old, attractive in a sharp-featured way, with auburn hair and calculating green eyes. "Hello," the woman called out, reining in her horse near the garden fence. "You must be the garden girl Fletcher hired." Mariah bristled at garden girl but kept her voice polite. "I am Mariah Foster, yes. May I help you? I am Victoria Hartwell. My father owns the largest ranch in the area, about 10 miles east." Victoria dismounted with practiced ease. "I heard Fletcher had hired help and wanted to come see for myself." "As you can see, I am real," Mariah said dryly. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Fletcher and I have an understanding, have for years. I wanted to make sure you knew that so there would be no confusion about your place here." Mariah felt her stomach sink. "I see. Well, thank you for clarifying. I am just here to tend the garden." "Good." Victoria looked around the property with an appraising eye. "This place has potential. Once Fletcher and I marry, we will combine our ranches. His land borders ours perfectly. It just makes sense." Before Mariah could respond, Fletcher emerged from the barn. His face darkened when he saw Victoria. "What are you doing here? Fletcher, darling, is that any way to greet your intended?" Victoria moved toward him with a smile. "I have told you before, we are not engaged. We will never be engaged." Fletcher's voice was hard in a way Mariah had never heard. "Your father and mine had an agreement." "My father is dead. Any agreement died with him." Fletcher crossed his arms. "You need to leave, Victoria. I just wanted to meet your hired help." Victoria glanced back at Mariah, make sure she understood the situation. "The only situation is that you are trespassing. Leave. Now." Victoria's smile faded. "You are making a mistake, Fletcher. You need the alliance with my father's ranch. You are barely making ends meet here on your own. I would rather lose everything than marry you. I believe I have made that clear." They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Victoria mounted her horse. "You will regret this," she said coldly, then rode away at a gallop. Fletcher stood watching until she was out of sight, his jaw clenched. Then he turned to Mariah. "I apologize for that. Victoria has had this fantasy in her head for years. Her father and mine discussed combining the ranches once, but it was just talk. I never agreed to anything." Mariah tried to keep her voice steady. "It is none of my business." "It is, though." Fletcher walked to the garden fence, gripping the top rail. "Because I care what you think. I care if you believe her lies." "Do you?" Mariah moved closer. "Care what I think?" Fletcher turned to face her. "Yes, I do. More than I should, probably. You are in my employ and I have no right to have feelings for you, but I do. I have since the first week you were here. Maybe since the first day." Mariah's heart soared. "I have feelings for you too, Fletcher." He looked stunned. "You do?" "Yes. I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or loneliness, but it is more than that. I care about you. I think about you constantly. When I am working in the garden, I find myself hoping you will come help so I can be near you." Fletcher climbed over the fence with a swift movement that surprised her with its grace. He stood before her, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray eyes. "Mariah, I am not good with words. I am rough around the edges. I have been alone so long I barely remember how to be around people. But you have brought light to this place. You have brought life. The garden is beautiful, but you are more beautiful than anything growing in it." "Fletcher," she whispered. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and cupped her face in his calloused hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes." The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then it deepened, and Mariah wrapped her arms around Fletcher's neck, pulling him closer. He held her carefully as if she were precious, and Mariah felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness of it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks. So have I." They stood holding each other in the middle of the garden, surrounded by the new life Mariah had coaxed from the earth. Around them, the harsh Nevada landscape stretched endlessly, but in this moment, they had created their own small paradise. Over the following weeks, their relationship blossomed alongside the vegetables. They were careful to maintain propriety, aware that gossip could travel quickly even in this isolated area. But in private moments, they stole kisses and held hands, learning each other's hearts as thoroughly as Mariah understood her plants and Fletcher knew his cattle. Fletcher taught Mariah to ride properly, giving her one of his gentler horses. They would ride out in the evenings to check on the herd, and he would point out landmarks, telling her stories about the land. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, how he wanted to improve his cattle stock, maybe add sheep in a few years, how he wanted to build a bigger house someday. Mariah told him about her childhood, the happiness she had known before her parents died. She described the ocean, which she had seen once as a child, and the way the fog rolled in over the California coast. She admitted her fears about being alone in the world, about never finding a place where she belonged. "You belong here," Fletcher told her one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the stars emerge. "With me if you will have me." "Is that a proposal?" Mariah asked, her heart racing. Fletcher shifted, suddenly nervous. "Not yet, not proper. We have only known each other 2 months, but it is a declaration of intent. When enough time has passed that people would not talk, I intend to ask you properly." Mariah smiled. "I intend to say yes." The garden reached its full glory in July. Lettuce and peas gave way to tomatoes and squash. Beans climbed their poles with abandon. Carrots and beets swelled underground. Mariah preserved what they could not eat fresh, teaching Fletcher how to can vegetables the way her mother had taught her. His root cellar filled with jars of tomatoes, pickles, and relishes. They ate fresh salads, vegetable stews, roasted squash, and green beans cooked with bacon. Fletcher declared every meal the best he had ever eaten, but their happiness was threatened in early August. Mariah had ridden into Verdi for supplies, and when she returned, she found Fletcher in the barn, his face grim. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "Had a visit from Jackson Hartwell, Victoria's father. He made me an offer for the ranch. Said he would pay fair price, let me walk away with enough money to start fresh somewhere else." Mariah felt cold. "What did you tell him?" "Told him the ranch is not for sale, never will be. This is my home, my father's legacy. I will die before I give it up." Fletcher began pacing. "But he made it clear that he will not take no for an answer. Said things might get difficult for me if I did not reconsider. He threatened you, essentially. He has influence in the area, owns the largest ranch, employs a lot of men. He can make trouble for me in a dozen different ways." Fletcher stopped pacing and looked at her. "I am worried he might try to use you to get to me. I am not afraid of the Hartwells. You should be. Jackson Hartwell is a ruthless man. He has built his empire by crushing anyone who gets in his way." Fletcher took her hands. "Maybe you should go back to Carson City for a while, just until this blows over." "No," Mariah said firmly. "I am not leaving you to face this alone. We are in this together, Fletcher." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I do not want you hurt because of me. I will not be. We will figure this out." The first sign of trouble came a week later. Mariah went out to the garden one morning to find half of it destroyed. Plants had been trampled, irrigation channels filled with dirt, stakes knocked down. The scarecrow had been torn apart, its clothes scattered across the ruined vegetables. She stood staring at the destruction, tears streaming down her face. Months of work, destroyed in a single night. Fletcher found her there, and the look of fury on his face was terrible to behold. "I will kill them," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will do no such thing." Mariah wiped her tears. "That is exactly what they want. They want you to do something reckless so they have an excuse to come after you legally. They destroyed your garden, your work. And we will replant what we can. We will salvage what survived. We will not let them win, Fletcher." She took his hand. "Please, promise me you will not do anything foolish." He was silent for a long moment, struggling with his rage. Finally, he nodded. "I promise. But we are going into town today. I am reporting this to the sheriff." The sheriff, a portly man named Tom Wheeler, listened to their complaint with obvious discomfort. "Did you see who did this?" "No," Fletcher admitted. but we both know who is behind it. Can't arrest a man on suspicion, Fletcher. You know that. Unless you have proof, there is nothing I can do. So they can just destroy property and face no consequences. Sheriff Wheeler shifted in his chair. I will make inquiries, but between you and me, you should think about Hartwell's offer. He always gets what he wants eventually. Might be easier to just take the money and move on. Fletcher stood abruptly. I will not be driven from my own land. They left the sheriff's office with nothing accomplished. Mariah could see the tension in Fletcher's shoulders, the anger he was barely containing. That night, he did not sleep, instead keeping watch over the property with his rifle. The second attack came 3 days later. Mariah was collecting eggs from the chicken coop when she heard Fletcher shout. She ran toward his voice and found him at the barn, staring at one of his horses. The animal was cut, not deeply, but enough to cause pain and bleeding. A warning, nothing more. Fletcher tended to the horse with shaking hands. This is escalating, he said quietly. Next time it might be worse than warnings. What can we do? I do not know. He looked at her and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. I can handle them coming after me, but if they hurt you, Mariah, I would not be able to contain my rage. I would do something we would both regret. That night, Mariah made a decision. The next morning, while Fletcher was out checking on the cattle, she saddled a horse and rode to the Hartwell ranch. It was an impressive spread, far larger than Fletcher's property, with a grand house that looked out of place in the rugged Nevada landscape. She was stopped by 2 ranch hands at the entrance, but when she explained she wanted to speak with Victoria, they let her pass. Victoria received her in a lavishly decorated parlor that felt absurd given the frontier surroundings. Well, this is a surprise. Come to beg for mercy. I came to talk, Mariah said evenly. Woman to woman without the men and their pride getting in the way. Victoria's eyebrows rose. Interesting. Sit down. Tell me what you have to say. Mariah sat on the edge of an ornate chair. You want Fletcher to sell his ranch so your father can expand his holdings. Fletcher refuses because that land is his heritage. What you are doing, the intimidation tactics, they are only making him more determined to stay. So, it seems to me that there must be a better solution. One where everyone gets something they want. Victoria studied her for a long moment. You love him, do not you? The garden girl actually fell in love with Fletcher Caine. I do love him, very much, and I am not going to let your family destroy him. What exactly are you proposing? What if your father could lease Fletcher's grazing land instead of buying the whole property? Fletcher keeps the house, the barn, the garden, maybe 20 acres around the buildings. Your father gets access to the rest for his cattle. Everyone benefits. Victoria sat back, considering. My father wants to own it, not lease it. But leasing would give him use of the land without the fight. Fletcher will never sell. You must see that by now. He would die first. Is this land worth blood? You really believe he would die for it? Yes, Mariah said simply. I do. Victoria was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I will speak to my father. I make no promises, but your proposal has merit. Thank you. As Mariah rode back to Fletcher's ranch, she felt cautiously hopeful. She found Fletcher pacing in front of the house, clearly having discovered her absence. Where were you? He demanded. I was worried sick. I went to see Victoria. You what? Fletcher looked horrified. Mariah, that was incredibly dangerous. You do not know what these people are capable of. I know they are human beings who respond to reason. I proposed a compromise. Your father wanted to combine the ranches, right? What if we combine them in a different way? Lease your grazing land to Hartwell instead of selling. You keep the heart of your property and he gets what he really wants, which is more land for his cattle. Fletcher stared at her. You think they would agree to that? I do not know. But it is worth trying, is it not? He pulled her into his arms. "You are either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I have ever met. Perhaps both." 2 days later, Jackson Hartwell himself rode onto the property. He was a large man in his 50s, with steel-gray hair and a commanding presence. Fletcher and Mariah met him together, standing united at the fence. "Miss Foster came to see my daughter with an interesting proposition," Hartwell said without preamble. "I have been thinking on it. And," Fletcher kept his voice neutral, "I have no desire to be at war with my neighbors. Bad for business and contrary to what you might think, I am not a villain. I simply want what is best for my ranch and my family." Hartwell dismounted, tying his horse to the fence rail. "Your father and I discussed combining our properties because it made economic sense. Two small ranches struggling separately when they could be one thriving operation together." "My father did not struggle," Fletcher said sharply. "Perhaps struggle is the wrong word, but you cannot deny that alone. Your ranch barely turns a profit. With my resources behind it, this land could be so much more productive." Hartwell looked around the property. "However, my daughter made a valid point. You are not going to sell. I can destroy you. I have the means and the will. But it would be messy and expensive and take time I would rather spend on more productive pursuits. So, I am willing to discuss a lease arrangement." They spent the next hour hammering out details. Hartwell would lease the grazing portions of Fletcher's land for a term of 20 years, renewable. The lease payment would provide Fletcher with a steady income while still allowing him to maintain ownership. Fletcher would keep 50 acres around the house and buildings, including the garden, and Hartwell would maintain the fences and share the cost of any improvements to water sources. It was not perfect, but it was fair. More importantly, it ended the hostilities. They shook hands on it, agreeing to have formal papers drawn up by a lawyer in Carson City. After Hartwell left, Fletcher turned to Mariah. "I cannot believe that worked. Sometimes all people need is a way to save face. You kept your land. He got what he actually needed. Victoria is probably relieved she does not have to marry you." Fletcher laughed, the tension finally draining from his shoulders. "You know what this means. With the lease income, I will have enough money to actually improve this place, maybe build that bigger house I mentioned. Is that so?" Mariah tried to keep her voice light, but her heart was pounding. Fletcher took both her hands in his. "Mariah Foster, we have known each other for 4 months. In that time, you have transformed my property, stood by me in conflict, and shown more courage than most men I know. You have brought life back to this place and to me. I know it has not been long, but I also know my own heart. Will you marry me?" Mariah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He kissed her then, long and deep, and when they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "We will need to go into Carson City," Fletcher said. "Get a ring, post the banns, do it properly. I do not need a fancy wedding, just you and the rest of our lives together." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Verdi. The ceremony was simple, attended by a handful of neighbors and the minister. Mariah wore a new dress she had sewn herself, pale blue cotton with white lace. Fletcher wore his best suit, his hair and beard neatly trimmed. When he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Mariah felt her heart might burst with happiness. That night, in the house that was now theirs together, Fletcher carried her over the threshold. "I have never been good with romantic gestures," he admitted, "but I want you to know that you are everything to me. You saved me, Mariah. I was barely living before you came here. You showed me what life could be." "You saved me too," Mariah said, touching his face gently. "I was lost, just drifting. You gave me a home, a purpose, and most importantly, you gave me love." Their first night together was tender and sweet, two lonely people finding comfort and joy in each other. In the morning, Mariah woke to find Fletcher watching her with a soft expression she had never seen before. "Good morning, wife," he said. "Good morning, husband." They spent their first weeks of marriage settling into their new life together. Mariah moved her belongings from the cabin into the main house. The small space that had seemed adequate for Fletcher alone now felt cramped with two people, but neither of them minded. They talked about the house they would build, sketching plans by lamplight, imagining rooms for the children they hoped to have. The garden continued to thrive. Mariah harvested the last of the summer vegetables and planted fall crops. She saved seeds for next year, carefully labeling and storing them. Fletcher helped her build a proper greenhouse against the south wall of the barn, using salvaged windows he had acquired in town. With the greenhouse, they could extend the growing season and start seedlings earlier in the spring. News of their marriage and the lease agreement with Hartwell spread through the small community. Most people seemed relieved that the conflict had been resolved without violence. A few neighbors, people Mariah had barely met, stopped by with small gifts and well wishes. She began to feel part of something larger than just Fletcher's isolated ranch, part of a community. Winter came early that year. By late October, snow was falling in the mountains, and frost killed the last of the garden plants. Mariah and Fletcher spent cozy evenings indoors, reading by the fire, making plans for spring. Fletcher taught her to play chess, and she taught him songs her mother had sung. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in the intimacy they had built. In December, Mariah realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Fletcher, wanting to be sure. When she finally shared the news, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Mariah asked, though she could see that he was. Happy does not begin to cover it, marred, terrified, amazed, grateful, everything all at once. He placed his hand gently on her stomach, though there was nothing to feel yet. "A child, our child." They immediately began preparing. Fletcher started building a cradle in the barn, working on it during the long winter evenings. Mariah sewed tiny clothes and blankets, imagining the baby who would wear them. They argued good-heartedly about names, never quite settling on anything but enjoying the discussion. The winter was harsh, with heavy snows that sometimes kept them confined to the house for days at a time. But Mariah found she did not mind. She felt safe and warm, surrounded by evidence of the life they had built together. The shelves were full of preserved vegetables from her garden. The root cellar held enough food to last until spring. And most importantly, she had Fletcher, steady and loving, always there when she needed him. In early March, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Mariah felt the baby move for the first time. It was just a flutter, easy to miss but unmistakable. She grabbed Fletcher's hand and placed it on her stomach. "Wait," she said. "Just wait." They stood still for several minutes. Then it happened again, a small movement beneath Fletcher's palm. His face transformed with wonder. "I felt it. I felt our baby." "Hello, little one," Mariah said softly, speaking to the growing life inside her. "We cannot wait to meet you." As spring arrived in full force, Mariah worked in the garden again, though Fletcher watched her like a hawk, worried she was overexerting herself. She laughed at his concern but secretly loved it. She planted another round of vegetables, bigger and more ambitious than the year before. She added flowers, too, bright spots of color that attracted bees and butterflies. Fletcher began construction on their new house in April. He hired 2 men from town to help with the heavy work, and the sound of hammering and sawing became a constant background noise. The house was taking shape on a slight rise overlooking the garden, with a wide front porch and large windows to let in light. It would have 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor large enough to entertain guests. "It is too big," Mariah protested when she saw the full plans. "We are going to fill it with children," Fletcher said confidently. "We need the space." By July, the house was largely complete, though interior finishing work continued. They moved in on a hot summer day, carrying their belongings up the hill to their new home. That night, they sat on the front porch, watching the sun set over their land, and Mariah felt overwhelmed with gratitude for how much her life had changed. "A year ago, I was loading a wagon in Carson City, scared and uncertain about coming here," she said. "Now look at us. A beautiful new house, a thriving garden, a baby on the way. It seems almost too good to be true." "It is true, though." Fletcher took her hand. "We built this together, Mariah. Everything we have, we earned through hard work and determination. We deserve this happiness." The baby came in late August, arriving during a thunderstorm that seemed appropriate for such a momentous occasion. The midwife from Verdi barely made it through the rain in time. Mariah labored through the night, with Fletcher holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally arrived with the dawn, a lusty cry announcing his entrance into the world, both parents wept with relief and joy. "A son," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Mariah's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Mariah looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, Samuel," she whispered, using the name they had finally agreed upon. "Welcome to the world." Fletcher touched his son's small hand with one finger, his expression full of awe. "He is perfect." "He is," Mariah agreed. Samuel Fletcher Caine proved to be a good baby, easy-tempered and healthy. Mariah recovered quickly from the birth, and within weeks was back to working in the garden with Samuel sleeping in a basket nearby. Fletcher was a devoted father, often found rocking his son or talking to him while he worked, telling the infant about the ranch and the land, and all the things he would teach him when he was older. The first year of Samuel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries. His first smile, his first laugh, the day he rolled over, then sat up, then crawled. Fletcher and Mariah documented every milestone, marveling at how quickly their son was growing. The garden continued to be Mariah's pride and joy. Word spread about the quality of her vegetables, and she began selling surplus produce in Verdi. What started as a small side income grew into a proper business. She hired 2 young women from town to help with the harvesting and preserving, and soon they were supplying vegetables to the hotel dining room and several restaurants in nearby Carson City. Fletcher's cattle operation thrived as well. The lease payments from Hartwell provided capital for improvements, and Fletcher used it wisely. He upgraded his herd, built better fences, and improved water access across the property. The ranch became profitable in a way it had never been during his father's lifetime. By the time Samuel was 2 years old, Mariah was pregnant again. This time, the news was met with calm happiness rather than shocked excitement. They had learned what to expect, felt confident in their ability to handle another child. Their daughter, Emma Marie Caine, was born in March of 1886, a spring baby with her mother's blue eyes and her father's dark hair. Samuel was fascinated by his new sister, insisting on helping with everything. He would fetch diapers, sing to her when she cried, and gently pat her head with chubby toddler hands. "You are going to be a wonderful big brother," Mariah told him. "Love, baby," Samuel declared firmly, and indeed he did. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. The garden grew larger each season. The house filled with the sound of children's laughter. Fletcher and Mariah worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word, building a life and a legacy together. In the spring of 1889, Mariah was in the garden with 7-year-old Samuel and 3-year-old Emma when she saw Victoria Hartwell riding up the road. She felt a moment of anxiety, memories of their past conflicts surfacing, but Victoria's expression was friendly as she dismounted. "Mariah, I hope I am not disturbing you. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Of course." Mariah instructed the children to continue weeding, then walked with Victoria toward the house. "Would you like some lemonade? That would be lovely." They sat on the front porch and Victoria accepted the glass Mariah poured. "Your garden is even more impressive than I had heard, and your children are beautiful. Thank you. What can I do for you, Victoria?" I wanted to apologize. Victoria set down her glass. "For how I behaved when you first came here. I was cruel and petty, trying to hold onto a fantasy that had never been real. Fletcher never loved me, and truthfully, I never loved him. I just hated the idea of not getting what I thought I wanted." Mariah was surprised by the admission. "That must have been difficult to acknowledge." "It was. But seeing how happy you and Fletcher are together, watching what you have built here, it made me realize that I was chasing the wrong things. I have since married someone I actually love, a rancher from California. We have a daughter now. I have what you and Fletcher have, and I understand why you both fought so hard for it. I am glad you found happiness, Victoria. I wanted you to know that I harbor no ill will. More than that, I admire what you have done. You took a dying ranch and brought it back to life. You stood up to my father and me and found a solution that benefited everyone. You are a remarkable woman, Mariah Caine." After Victoria left, Mariah sat for a while on the porch, reflecting on how much had changed. The woman who had once threatened her was now offering friendship. The ranch that had been struggling was now prosperous. The garden that had been nothing but turned earth was now the talk of the region. That evening, after the children were in bed, Mariah and Fletcher sat together in the parlor. She told him about Victoria's visit, and he shook his head in amazement. "I never thought I would see the day Victoria Hartwell apologized to anyone," he said. "People can change. We all changed. You were a lonely, isolated man when I met you. I was adrift and purposeless. Look at us now." Fletcher pulled her close. "I love you, Mariah, more every day. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A home full of life and love, a purpose beyond just surviving, hope for the future. I love you too. You gave me a place to belong, work that matters, and a family. You saw me as more than just hired help. You saw the person I could be, and you helped me become her." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds through the open window. The garden beyond the house was dark but full of growing things. The cattle in the distance were quiet. Their children slept peacefully upstairs. Everything was as it should be. Over the following years, the Caine family continued to grow and prosper. A third child, a son they named Thomas, arrived in 1891. The garden expanded to cover 3 acres, employing a full crew of workers. Mariah's preserves and pickles became famous throughout the region, sold in stores as far away as San Francisco. She published a small booklet about vegetable gardening in harsh climates that became popular among other frontier families. Fletcher's cattle operation grew as well. He became known for his quality stock and fair dealing. Young ranchers sought his advice, and he was generous with his knowledge. He maintained his lease agreement with the Hartwells, and the relationship between the families became cordial, then friendly. Their children played together, and Jackson Hartwell often said that the lease arrangement was the best business decision he had ever made. Samuel grew into a tall, serious boy who loved the land as much as his father did. He would follow Fletcher around the ranch, learning everything he could about cattle and horses and the business of ranching. Emma was more like her mother, fascinated by growing things, spending hours in the garden learning plant lore. Thomas was still young, but he showed signs of inheriting his parents' determination and work ethic. In 1895, on their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised Mariah by taking her to San Francisco for a week. It was the first time either of them had left the ranch for more than a day since their marriage. They left the children in the care of a trusted neighbor and traveled by train to the city. Mariah was overwhelmed by San Francisco. So many people, such noise and bustle, but it was also exciting. They saw the ocean together, stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended the theater. Fletcher bought her a beautiful necklace, and she bought him a fine pocket watch. But mostly, they just enjoyed being together, reminded of why they had fallen in love in the first place. On the train ride home, Mariah rested her head on Fletcher's shoulder. "That was wonderful, but I am ready to be home." "So am I," Fletcher agreed. "There is no place I would rather be than on our land with our family, living the life we built together." When they arrived back at the ranch, their children ran to greet them with such enthusiasm that they nearly knocked both parents over. Samuel, now 13, tried to maintain his dignity but could not hide his smile. Emma, 9, threw herself into Mariah's arms. Thomas, 4, clung to Fletcher's leg. "Tell us about the ocean," Emma demanded. "Did you bring presents?" Thomas wanted to know. "Did anything happen while we were gone?" Samuel asked, ever the responsible oldest child. They gathered in the parlor, and Fletcher and Mariah told stories of their trip while the children listened with rapt attention. Later, after the children were in bed, Fletcher and Mariah walked out to the garden. It was a warm summer night, and the plants were lush and full. "Do you ever think about that first day you arrived?" Fletcher asked. "All the time. I was so nervous. The garden was just turned earth and dreams. You were this gruff, bearded man who barely spoke. I had no idea what I was getting into. I saw you climb down from that wagon and something in my chest shifted. I told myself it was just gratitude for having help, but I think I knew even then that you were going to change everything." Mariah took his hand. "I came to tend your vegetables. You gave me the garden and your heart. Best trade I ever made." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by the abundance they had created, and kissed under the Nevada stars. Around them, their land stretched out in all directions, no longer harsh and forbidding but home. The garden that had brought them together continued to grow and thrive, a living symbol of what two people could build when they worked together with love and determination. As the years passed, the Caine Ranch became an institution in the region. Mariah's garden techniques were copied by others, transforming the agricultural possibilities of the area. Fletcher's methods for sustainable ranching set standards that others followed. But more than their professional success, they were known for their love story. The hired woman and the lonely rancher who had found each other and built something beautiful together. Samuel eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the cattle operation, showing a natural talent for the work. Emma developed her mother's garden into something even more impressive, experimenting with new varieties and techniques. Thomas split his time between his siblings' interests, loving both equally. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Fletcher and Mariah sat on their front porch watching their children work. Samuel was out with the herd. Emma was in the greenhouse with several of her workers. Thomas was repairing a fence line. They were all grown now, or nearly so, capable and confident. "We did well," Mariah said softly. "We did," Fletcher agreed. "3 good children, a successful ranch, a life full of love and meaning. No regrets, not a single one." Mariah thought about it, reviewing the 18 years since she had arrived on this dusty Nevada ranch. The hard work, the challenges, the conflicts, the triumphs, the quiet daily joys. "No regrets," she said firmly. "I would not change a thing." As they sat together, comfortable in the silence of long companionship, a rider approached. It was Emma, taking a break from the greenhouse. She tied her horse and climbed the porch steps, settling between her parents. "What are we looking at?" she asked. "Everything," Fletcher said. "Everything we built," Emma smiled. "It is pretty spectacular, is it not?" "Yes," Mariah agreed, putting her arm around her daughter. "It really is." The 3 of them sat together as the afternoon sun slanted across the garden, across the fields, across the home they had all built together. The vegetables grew in neat rows, tended by loving hands. The cattle grazed peacefully on the leased land. The house stood solid and welcoming, full of memories and laughter. Everything was exactly as it should be. Fletcher took Mariah's hand, as he had done countless times over the years, and she squeezed back. They had started with nothing but hope and determination. A lonely man and a desperate woman, finding each other in the harsh Nevada landscape. Now they had everything that mattered. Family, home, purpose, and most importantly, love that had grown as surely as the vegetables in the garden, nurtured carefully over the years until it was strong and enduring. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the Caine family remained on their porch. Soon Samuel would return from the range and Thomas would finish his work. They would all gather for supper, sharing stories of their day, making plans for tomorrow. The next generation was already growing, carrying forward the legacy that Fletcher and Mariah had created. In the garden, the vegetables continued to grow, reaching toward the sun, full of life and promise. It had all started there, with Mariah tending plants in empty soil, and Fletcher watching from a distance, not yet understanding that he was witnessing the beginning of his salvation. She had come to tend his vegetables. He had given her the garden and his growing heart. From that simple beginning, they had built an empire of love that would endure for generations. The evening star appeared in the darkening sky, and Mariah made a silent wish of gratitude. For this land, this family, this man beside her who had shown her what true love meant. For the garden that had brought them together and the life that had grown from it. For every moment, every challenge, every joy that had led them to this perfect evening. Fletcher looked at her, as if sensing her thoughts. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Mariah answered truthfully. And as darkness fell over the Nevada desert, the Caine family remained together, surrounded by the abundance of their love, certain in the knowledge that they had created something lasting and true. The lonely cowboy and the woman who came to tend his vegetables had found each other in the wilderness and built a paradise. Their story would be told for years to come, an example of what was possible when 2 people committed to building a life together, one day at a time, with patience and love and unwavering faith in each other. The garden would continue to grow. The ranch would continue to prosper. The children would carry forward what their parents had begun. But the heart of it all would always be that first moment when a desperate young woman climbed down from a wagon, and a lonely rancher felt his heart begin to hope again. From that small seed of possibility had grown this magnificent life, as surely as a tiny seed grows into a plant that produces abundant fruit. As the stars emerged one by one in the vast Nevada sky, Fletcher and Mariah Caine sat hand in hand, surrounded by the evidence of their love, content in the knowledge that they had found what most people only dreamed of. True partnership, enduring love, and a home built on the foundation of mutual respect and shared dreams. The Wild West had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately blessed them with more than they had ever imagined possible. Their story was complete, full and rich and satisfying, a testament to the power of love to transform empty spaces into gardens of abundance. They had taken a dying ranch and brought it back to life. They had faced down enemies and emerged victorious. They had raised a family and built a legacy. And through it all, they had loved each other with the kind of devotion that poets write about and singers celebrate. The lonely cowboy had given her the garden and his growing heart. She had tended both with skill and dedication, coaxing them to flourish beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a love story that would echo through time, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of finding their own paradise in the most unexpected places.